waiting patiently for the last 25 minutes. We had technical difficulty and the internet just wouldn't cooperate. We apologize and we thank you for having waited to be here. So one important note, as you're looking at the video, you will be able to trigger a closed caption by clicking on the CC at the bottom of your screen. And if you want to see closed captioning, just do that. So I'd like to offer the land acknowledgement as the first thing. And we want to take a moment to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of Indigenous peoples, including the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. We are all treaty people. Many of us have come here as settlers and immigrants in this generation or in generations past. Metrolinx declares its commitment to building meaningful relationships with Indigenous peoples. And we acknowledge the historic and continued impacts of colonization and the need to work towards meaningful reconciliation with the original caretakers of this land. We acknowledge that Metrolinx operates on lands covered by 20 treaties, and that we have a responsibility to recognize and value the rights of Indigenous nations and peoples, and conduct business in a manner that is built on a foundation of trust, respect, and collaboration. Also, a quick safety moment. The seasons are starting to change and it's almost fall, which means darker mornings and evenings. In fact, as I look out the window, it looks like it's dark. So please, drivers, slow down, pay closer attention to pedestrians and cyclists in your neighborhood. And pedestrians and cyclists, please be aware of your surroundings. So as I said, tonight's event is about the East segment, and it will deal with the East Harbor, Riverside Leslie, and Gerard Carlaw stations. It's one of a series of virtual events. If you have questions about one of the other segments, you can either find recordings of the other events that we've done earlier in September, or you can register for the next event, which will be occurring in October. Tonight's session was scheduled for 90 minutes. We started late, so we're going to extend the time. There are a lot of questions, and we want to get to as many as we can. The first half of the question and answer period will draw on questions submitted via the question form that's below the video on your page. And if you're there, take a minute to scroll down and vote for the questions that you'd like us to tackle live in tonight's meeting. Metrolinx will make an effort to respond to all of the questions online, but we will be able to cover a good portion of them live tonight. So vote for the ones you want to hear live. And if you don't see your question covered, you can also add a question. After the written questions, we're going to go over to the Zoom room, and right below the video, you can see a link to join Zoom. If you'd like to ask your question out loud orally, you can go over there, and Georgina Collymore will be your host over there, and in the second half of the questions and answers, you'll be able to ask a question. When you're there, we'd ask that you try and keep your question to 2 or 3 minutes so that everybody has a chance to ask questions. Again, if you've just joined us, there is closed captioning. Just click on the CC at the bottom of your screen. So we have a panel of experts here from Metrolinx, and I'd like to introduce them. First off, Richard Tucker is the Ontario Line Project Director. Malcolm Mackay is a sponsor for the Ontario Line Project. Carrie Schaefer is a senior manager on Metrolinx Environmental Programs and Assessment team, and John Potter is a manager on the Design Standards team. Welcome, Richard, Malcolm, Carrie, and John. And I believe, Malcolm, that you're going to lead off the presentation.
Thank you, Joseph. I very much appreciate it. And again, we apologize for the delay to the start. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the environmental assessment, and Carrie's going to be walking us through that. We're also going to be talking about the release of the Lakeshore East Joint Corridor and East Harbor Early Works Report. And really what's also quite exciting is the launch of our online immersive sound demonstration that's specific to the Joint Corridor area. We're also going to talk about the consultation on the noise and retaining wall design. And then Richard's going to be speaking about the construction sequencing within the Riverside Leslieville area. And then we're going to have a question and answer period. Now I'll just pass it over to Carrie. Carrie.
Thanks very much, Malcolm. So if we can go to the next slide. And good evening, everyone. So before we get into some of the more detailed discussion about the Lakeshore East Joint Corridor, I did want to take a moment to review and remind everyone of our EA process. So we are following a new Ontario Line EA regulation process that was introduced last year. And it's very much similar to the typical EA process you are used to seeing for Metrolinx projects. The main difference between our typical process and the Ontario Line regulation is actually the requirement for additional reporting and points of contact and engagement with communities and interested parties. So in terms of reporting, as you can see from the slide, we've completed our environmental conditions report in 2020, and that provided all the details on the background conditions within the Ontario Line study area. So this is the information that we're pulling forward now as we move into assessing the specific project impacts. That's where we are right now with early works reports. And as we've mentioned previously, early works are actually, for the Ontario Line, are components of this project that will advance ahead of our main works. And this is really in order to reduce construction delays to the main contract and really create efficiencies in in implementation. So early works reports, really these are standalone environmental assessment reports. They focus solely on the early works portion of the Ontario Line. And they're robust EA reports that study potential impacts of the proposed construction work, and they put forward mitigation measures in order for us to minimize effects. One thing that remains constant for all of our EA reports, whether it's for subways or GO expansion projects, is while we summarize the design alternatives in our reports, our impact assessment process focuses on a preferred project concept. So really important to keep that in mind. The last requirement under our regulation is the environmental impact assessment report. And this study, this report will study the remainder of the Ontario Line project, including the operations of the line. It will very much resemble a typical EA report that you're used to seeing, so assessing proposed project, putting forward commitments to mitigation and future work. So if we could advance the slide, please. If we look, we can see a bit of a timeline and a visual of where we are in our EA process, the reports we've completed to date, as well as the construction timelines. Noting once again that construction work associated with the joint corridor will not proceed until the early works reports, so the EA for this segment, have been completed. And you may notice here that there's some expected vegetation clearing that needs to take place before early works can commence. We're still working through the detailed schedule for this, and we'll be back soon with more definitive timelines. So this is just an overview of where we are at the moment. And tonight we want to take a good portion of time to talk about the joint corridor early works and its associated EA. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Richard to give us an overview of the scope of the proposed work in this area. Richard.
Hi, thanks, Carrie, and good to see you all. So in terms of the Lakeshore East Joint Corridor, the scope and sequencing, you can see on our left there's an image there, and what we've done is we've put together an interactive animation that's posted to our website that you can click on and you can take a look at and look at all the details of how work will advance through this area. And hopefully that'll be really helpful in terms of answering your questions, and invite you to take a look at it when you have the opportunity. Basically, the work between in this area between Eastern and Pape Avenues consists really of the reconfiguration of the GO tracks within the existing corridor to basically support a total of 4 GO tracks, 3 now and another one in the future, plus 2 Ontario Line tracks. To do that, we're going to be replacing the 4 existing bridges at Queen, Dundas, Logan, and Gerard. And we have basically, and we're also looking at bridges at Logan as well. If I didn't have that one already. We also have construction of the supporting infrastructure for GO in the future. So that's the catenary foundations for the catenary poles and the laying out of their subgrade and the drainage. And then all along the line on the east, on the south and the north sides, we have the retaining walls and noise barriers that we'll talk about further as we move forward through the evening. So with that, back to Carrie.
Thanks, Richard. If we can flip to the next slide, please. Are we flipping to the next slide? Thank you. So Metrolinx has just released today its draft early works reports for both the Lakeshore East Joint Corridor and the East Harbour Station. These reports are environmental assessments that look at potential impacts associated with the early works construction, as Richard just described. So as with all of our EA reports, we look at all the environmental disciplines, both natural and built environment. We assess for potential impacts, and we put forward mitigation measures to address any potential adverse effects. Now, these draft reports are available for public review until October 24th, so really encouraging everyone to head to our website and review the information and submit your very important feedback. Once the comment period closes, we'll then take this feedback and use it to update and augment our final report, which will be made available along with the consultation method. And now we also understand that the community needs time to digest this information. So our plan is to be back on October 5th to discuss and hear feedback on these two reports from this community. If we can go to the next slide, please. Now, there really is quite a lot of information in these reports, and there are more fulsome decks that look at each of the environmental disciplines on our website. But for tonight, we wanted to take you through some of the topics that are likely to be of the most interest to this community. So to start with the Joint Corridor Early Works Report, it takes an in-depth look at construction, noise, and vibration impacts. So we've done a thorough but conservative assessment of the potential impacts associated with this work and have put forward commitments to limit noise and vibration during construction using all the tools we have available to us. So the list of mitigation measures is really quite lengthy, and this slide highlights just some of them, but encouraging everyone to check out the report for further detail. I do want to highlight just a few points here, and noting that before construction can begin, noise and vibration management plans have to be produced by the constructor, as well as precondition surveys at properties that might be affected by vibration-causing activities. So what the noise and vibration plan will do is we'll do a thorough assessment of the means and methods of construction, and it will outline the mitigation measures that will be implemented by the contractor in order to control noise and vibration. Now, we'll also be requiring noise and vibration monitoring throughout the entire duration of the construction project. That's really to keep everyone honest, to make sure that we are meeting the commitments we've said we would. And we'll be able to monitor this noise and vibration in real time, so we can see if levels start to creep up. We can be proactive and take action and investigate further mitigation as it's required. We'll, of course, be communicating and consulting with nearby residents and providing advance notice where there is any noise and vibration causing activities expected. As well, we'll have a fulsome complaint protocol in place to address any concerns. And our community relations staff will be available to field any questions, concerns, or comments you might have. Now, if we can flip to the next slide, I want to stay on noise and vibration, but talk about from the operational side. Now, we've been out to talk to the community, or at least virtually talk to the community on numerous occasions now, and we understand just how important noise and vibration levels, keeping noise and vibration levels to a minimum really is. We've been working very hard in the background to advance this technical body of work and ensure that goal is realized. So as you'll recall, Metrolinx has committed to installing noise walls along the joint corridor. These noise walls will be at a minimum height of 5 meters, and they'll be transparent to ensure minimal visual impact. We've now completed our operational noise and vibration assessment, which is appended to the full early works report, so that is all available on our website. The assessment we've completed is a modeling assessment, and it looks to compare the current and future conditions under a full build or a maximum service scenario. So what that means is that we've modeled the combined impacts of the future Ontario line and the expanded future GO rail service along this corridor. So we've looked at the maximum service scenario and we've modeled that condition. As you can see from the slide here, we've modeled noise and vibration impacts to 28 sensitive receptors along the corridor. So I'm not sure if you can see, but there are some pink dots that you can see on the map here, and those are the sensitive receptors. Sensitive receptors are basically places where people reside, so like single family homes, apartments, schools, etc. And the results of the assessment is really good news. With the implementation of noise walls, we'll be able to reduce noise below your current conditions at the majority of the locations along the corridor. Now, depending on the location, the reductions in noise vary, but in some locations we are seeing as high as 10 decibel reductions, which is about the equivalent of being half as loud. So if we flip to the next slide, I want to take a moment to say we understand how difficult it can be to conceptualize noise, especially in a future scenario that you aren't familiar with. And of course, I appreciate that people don't generally go around talking about decibel levels, which is why we tried something new here. So we now have what's called an immersive sound demonstration available on the following website, as you can see on the slide. And that's available for everyone to go and check out. And what we've done here is our noise and engineers have gone out to familiar points along the joint corridor, such as Bruce Mackey Park, for example. And we've taken 3D audio and visual recordings of the current conditions. So both what it looks like and what it sounds like at the moment, including train pass-bys. Our team has then adjusted the video with 3D animation to represent how the future Ontario Line project will look at that location. Along with this, our noise engineers have been able to simulate the noise from future GO and Ontario Line pass-bys, both with and without noise walls, based on the assessment work that we've completed. So if you look at this image on the slide, you can see here what the website looks like, and I believe that this is Bruce Mackey Park. So what this really does is it gives you a sense of what the project will look like and sound like in the future, and the added improvements from the noise wall. So you can toggle through 3 conditions here: the existing condition, the future condition without mitigation, and the future condition with noise walls. And it really becomes clear with this simulation of the added benefits of the noise wall. So please do check this out. I think it's a really neat tool that allows you to really experience what is otherwise a somewhat abstract concept. So if we can move on to the next slide and move away from the built environment, I want to spend a moment talking about the natural environment. Now, I'm sure as you've heard me say before, protection of trees and green spaces is of the utmost importance to Metrolinx. Where we can protect trees, we will. And as you've heard from Richard before, our design utilizes innovative T-wall approach that will allow us to do a lot of the work from inside the rail corridor. And what that does is allows us to minimize our construction footprint and our impacts to green space. And if we flip to the next slide, I do want to acknowledge that we know that there are some trees and vegetation that will need to be removed within the corridor for the Ontario Line project and the already approved GO expansion project. And this will be done with the utmost care to ensure that we're protecting wildlife and bird habitat, that we're protecting trees with barriers and compensating for any vegetation lost with local planting projects within the community to the greatest extent possible. We know that some of this work needs to be done prior to early works construction in summer of 2022, and we'll be utilizing the windows outside of the bird breeding season as much as possible. So the timelines for these removals are still being finalized, and we'll be back to you with more detailed schedule when it's available. Metrolinx is working with the city on a tree replacement and compensation strategy for any removals required outside of the corridor. And permits and local compensation ratios will be required for all of these removals. The arborist reports for these are still underway as we move forward with the detailed design and we finalize things, but we do expect that this will be available to the public later this year or very early next year. And the actual removals for this portion will likely take place in the latter half of 2022. So lastly, we're also working with City Parks, Forest and Recreation, as well as the Toronto Region Conservation Authority to explore park enhancements and tree compensation programs for your community. So as you know, green space is limited in the city. So if those participating on tonight know of tree planting opportunities in your areas, please do reach out. We'd love to hear from you and your ideas on this. And I believe more detail on a survey will be provided later in this presentation. So with that, I will flip it back to Malcolm.
Thank you very much, Carrie. We'd like to just circle back and revisit some material that was presented to you last time we met, and that's regarding the 4 parks, McCleary Playground, Jimmy Simpson, Bruce Mackey Park, and the Gerard Carlaw Dog Park, Parkette. All of those parks are going to get larger. They're actually going to get larger by 2,600 square meters, which is just over 6 basketball courts. So all the parks through this neighborhood are actually going to get larger as a result of the work that's going to be undertaken for the GO expansion and the Ontario line. So that's exciting news about the parks and what the ultimate build is going to be for those parks. Now I'd like to pass it over to John Potter. John?
Yes, thanks, Malcolm. Next slide. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about, well, we call it retaining wall and noise wall design elements, but actually it's a comprehensive approach to the design of the retaining wall, noise walls, and the vegetative elements that we plan to restore along the corridor. And this presentation is not so much about what we plan to bring to your community. It's really setting the stage for your feedback. We are posting a questionnaire. It's called the Ontario Line East Segment Design Feedback Questionnaire. The details will be provided later in the presentation. And what I'm going to be going through with you are some of the concepts we're working on, some of the ideas we have, but we really need your feedback on these proposals in order to move forward, I think, in a successful and responsible way. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is probably not the first time you've seen what we call the design principles. These principles underpin the work we're doing in this part of the city along the joint corridor through Riverside and Leslieville. So as I go through them, obviously we're focused on enhancing community and rail safety. There's 3 in here: protecting existing trees, which Carrie spoke about, and replanting. There's minimizing visual and physical impacts and maximizing vegetative screening. And those 3 principles are all they're all linked, because everything that we're proposing in terms of the noise walls, retaining walls, and the landscape and planting strategies are all aimed to ultimately minimize the visual and physical impacts. And in a sense, over time, our objective is that the parks will be left in better shape than you find them. And then, of course, enhancing unique neighborhood character. You live in this neighborhood, you work in this neighborhood. We need to hear from you, which is why I encourage you to go to the questionnaire when you see the link at the end of the presentation. And again, reduce sound and disturbances, as Carrie spoke about. I also encourage you, the immersive sound demonstration videos is really a great tool, and you should check that out. I think it'll answer a lot of questions you may be having. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is basically the next 4 slides are going to deal with what I call a kit of parts, the components and features that we're looking at for the retaining walls, the sound walls, the vegetation features, and some other additional features. And all these elements are in the online questionnaire that I keep talking about. For each of these different topics, you'll see a number of choices. We'll ask you to rate them based on, is this something you'd like to see or absolutely you do not want to see? So again, I stress, go to that site, give us your feedback and we will be moving forward based on some of the things we hear. Next slide. Oops. Next slide, please. Whoop. I think I just dropped out. Thanks. Go back 1 slide to the noise wall. A little bit of one more back. Yes. So here, when we talk about noise walls, Carrie was talking about, we're looking at transparent noise barriers. And really one of the reasons the reason we want to do this is transparent panels maintain sky views and access to sunlight. And I think that's very important when you're using the parks on either side of the corridor, because you will have long views, and it helps the noise walls start to disappear. It means that, we get good sun east or west, from the east or west at different times of the day on the embankments or in the parks directly adjacent to the corridor. And just, one of the key features about these transparent noise barriers is we do put bird deterrent patterns on them, because of course, like any window or reflective surface, there's a danger that birds will fly into them. So this is something we do as a matter of course when we specify our noise barriers. Next slide, please. So we talked about the retaining walls earlier, and we picked a system that can be largely constructed from within the corridor in order to minimize disruption to the adjacent parks and properties. That said, noise walls can be visually pretty obtrusive, or they can be plain concrete walls or whatever, and we recognize that this neighborhood has a unique character, and that we also want to make sure that these noise barriers fit into their context, which includes several parks. So what we are proposing is a series of surface patterns or treatments to the noise barriers. This will help break down the mass. It also creates visual interest and deters graffiti. And beyond the provision of, or the possibility of texturing them, we're also looking at vegetative screening, landscaped embankments, which are covered on the next slide. So a big part of what we're hoping to do is these noise barrier or these retaining structures, we're hoping to start to screen them to recreate the vegetative backdrop to these parks in particular. And we plan to do that mostly through vegetation and plantings. And so you see here, these are some of the materials that we're considering. And again, we're looking for your feedback in our questionnaire so we can start to move forward on this. And we are also looking at landscape strategies for both visually reducing the size of the noise barrier, but also giving the plantings opportunities to grow vertically. So we're looking at vegetative embankments and terracing. We're looking at continuous benches. All these different elements are illustrated in the questionnaire. And now to the last slide. So it's not just, plants, shrubs, landscaped embankments we're looking at. As Carrie said, we've been aiming to protect as many trees as we can, but there inevitably will be some tree loss, and we will be replanting, and we can, add additional density to the vegetative screening depending on the types of trees we look at. And so this is also a question that we're going to be coming to you for, is what kind of trees would you like to see in your park? I mean, anything we plant has to be native and non-invasive. And there's the closer they are to the rail corridor, there may be some constraints on the species based on the size of their foliage or their broom. But yes, we really are looking for some feedback from you on this. And so with that, I pass it back to Malcolm.
Thank you very much, John. So our next consultation is John described in the website that's opening up. We're using an interactive public survey tool to be able to get your comments. We welcome that. At the end of the slide deck here, we will be sharing with you the coordinates for that, and we really encourage your active involvement and comment on that. Richard, I'll pass it to you for some discussion on construction.
Hey, Malcolm, thank you. My favorite topic. So could we move to the next slide, please? So when we look at construction, we recognize that construction can be disruptive to the neighborhood, and we carefully considered and thought through with our project team how could we mitigate the effects of construction on the neighborhood, and we basically looked at using a three-prong approach to this. So the first one is doing all the construction from within the corridor, so we don't have to access through the parks. We don't have to access from local neighborhood streets. We deliberately have planned and sequenced our construction so that at all times we're working from the railway corridor. And one of the techniques that we've brought in is a T-wall construction, which are precast T's. If you can imagine a T lying on its side, and the face is the outer face of the retaining wall. And basically, we bring those in and stack them up from inside the railway corridor, and then backfill them from inside the railway corridor, so that basically there's very, very little impact on outside of the railway corridor when we do that. Of course, when we do that, as Carrie's mentioned, there may be some trees that are affected that are right on the boundary between the railway corridor and the parks. Wherever possible, we will avoid those trees and protect them. There will be some cases where trees will need to be removed, and then the compensation policy will take effect. But our first directive and our primary directive is to retain trees wherever possible. The second part that we do is looking at restricting the access to the corridor to certain points along the route. So this is, in terms of what we do, is if you look at the arrows on the plan, basically we're looking at Eastern Avenue, main streets, Eastern, Queen, Dundas, Logan, and Gerrard are access points. And it says workers, but it's really all vehicles, all materials, both in and out, will be accessing through these points only. So there's no other points that will be accessing to the corridor. So the three points are using the corridor space for our construction activities, using those advanced construction techniques to make sure that we can do the work from inside the corridor, and making sure that the access is only from the main streets in the neighborhood, the main commercial streets. Next slide, please. So here's a look at just the timeline that we have for these activities. As you can see, we're at 2022 at the moment. The first step in the sequence will be looking at vegetation removal within the corridor. And as Carrie said, that the timing is being worked out on that, and we have the arborist reports just being finalized around our design, and we hope to be sharing that in the near future. The phase one is basically starting in the middle of 2022, is looking at utility relocations and preparatory works to engaging with the construction in the corridor. And then we'll start along the south side of the corridor first, doing the retaining walls along the south side. And then we'll move into the bridge construction that we talked about earlier. And then we'll carry on into the north side of the corridor, including the bridges that will support the Ontario line. And then finally, into 2024, we'll be looking at doing the Ontario line stations, basically at Gerrard and at Queen Street. So you can see the construction period for work of this scope is relatively short and compressed, only about 1.5 years of work in this location, excluding the station construction themselves, which will be localized to those two stations. Next slide, please. And then finally, here's a slide just showing those bridge locations we talked about, and where they're located in the neighborhood, although I'm sure most of you are quite familiar with where they are. These bridges, when they're replaced, will be modern bridges. As you know, many of the bridges that are there now are quite dated and have some deferred maintenance on them. So this will be a great opportunity to update these bridges, make sure that the neighborhood won't be interrupted by maintenance work that otherwise would have had to been scheduled. And we'll also be increasing the clearance of these bridges to meet city standards. And so that'll add about a meter more of clearance to each of these locations. So make it a better walkthrough and provide more clearance for the streetcars, which we all know is a bit of a tight fit right at the moment. Next slide, please. Back to you, Malcolm.
Thank you, Richard. So the upcoming public engagement, as we described earlier, the retaining wall and noise wall public consultation is launched. It's available at Metrolinx Ontario line engagement .ethos.net. You'll see this on our website, and we'll be collecting your responses until October 14th. The sound demo, the immersive sound demo, is online and is available at OntarioLineSoundStudio.ca, and we're really excited to get your feedback on that also. The East Harbour and Lakeshore Joint Corridor Early Works Report was issued today, and it's open for public consultation until October 14th. We're actually going to host a virtual open house on October 5th to hear feedback from yourselves and be able to answer some of your questions. As you might have seen, the Riverside Community Office is now open from Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. at 770 Queen Street East. Please feel welcome to come in, talk about the Ontario line, share your questions, share your thoughts. We'd love to hear from you. Next slide. Well, we also apologize for starting late tonight, but we do welcome your feedback. It's important for us. There's a number of ways to keep in touch with us. You can call us at 416-202-5100, or you can email us ontarioline@metrolinx.com, or just go to the website, metrolinx.com/OntarioLine. Please sign up for our e-newsletter if you haven't already, so that we can keep you up to date on some of the upcoming virtual events. Now we'd like to start the question and answer session, and we'll send it back to Joseph.
Okay, thank you very much. That was a lot of information. And again, for anyone who is following the presentation, you can download the presentation from the site right below the video, and it includes the links to the surveys that were presented to you. So let's start off. There are the 4 top voted for questions that were submitted fairly early, but garnered more votes than any others. I think they come down to a basic issue that I want to raise with you, and I hope you'll address in some detail. And essentially, it is that there was a viable route that had been identified for the relief line before it was canceled, and that route would allow for tunneling, that as a result of some of the changes that have been made to the plans as you've been progressing, including additional bridge construction and other things, that the cost comparison between the underground tunnel as it was planned and the above ground may not really be evident. So the question is, why would you do a side-by-side cost comparison? Why have you not done that with the current above ground plan versus the underground plan? And I wonder if you could address that. It seems to run through a number of questions that got a number of votes.
Yeah. Hi, Joseph. It's Malcolm. I can start to answer that. So so we are very, very aware of the desire of some people to have an underground alignment through here, similar to the Relief Line South. And the proposal that was put forth by the community was a kind of hybrid version of the Relief Line South, where it still respected the good transfer at East Harbour Station, and continued east, went underground around Booth Avenue, and then continued north, and kind of at that point in time mimicked the Relief Line South through a car loss station and up to the Gerrard Station. So I guess the first thing is when the initial business case was prepared, the comparison was between the Ontario line and the Relief Line South, and a do-nothing proposal. And the Ontario line was found to perform better. But there were concerns. There were concerns about noise, vibration, the communities of the above grade sections as part of the Ontario line. And what we have done is we've gone through a diligent effort to mitigate and deal with those issues. You heard Carrie earlier today talking about the fact that noise is actually going to be reduced by up to half in some areas through the alignment. We've the Go Widening, the Go Expansion project was going to be coming through this area regardless. And we're really just piggybacking on some of that work was going to be occurring anyways. And the Ontario line actually enables the full sound barrier through this neighborhood. So from a noise and vibration point of view, we've addressed that issue. With respect to the impacts to parks, as we also presented in this deck, the parks are actually getting larger, and through the construction methodology that's been developed by Richard and his team, they're actually going to be staying out of the parks. They're going to be working from within the corridor. Their access ways are such that by and large, all the parks are protected. And in fact, when we're done, the retaining walls will be inside the Metrolinx property line. And the park space is actually going to increase by 2,600 square meters. So those are all very positive things. With respect to a side-by-side comparison, we actually, again, the Relief Line South was compared side-by-side to the Ontario line. We have, through the slightly revised running of the Ontario line through this area with the both Ontario line trains on the north side of the joint corridor, the heavy rail track, are maintaining our pricing structure. There are some easier ways, the things that are built during this. There are more difficult things like the bridge construction. So it's a series of push and pulls. But we would not have been pursuing this if it was going to be more expensive, dramatically more expensive, or wasn't beneficial. So the North Alignment also has the benefit of simpler stations with the center platform. There's no confusion about which platform you get on and which direction you're going in. So those are all very positive outcomes. With respect to the community's proposal, once I said again, there is a hybrid. I call it a hybrid of the Relief Line South, and we have done some high-level costing comparisons side by side against this, and we're expecting upwards of $870 million more expensive to do this underground alignment as suggested. It also has a lot of problems. We still have to deal with the Midtown Interceptor sewer that crosses the alignment between Carlaw and Gerrard. The Enbridge facility down at East Harbour has to be avoided. It's a vital piece of infrastructure that it can't be disrupted. There's also sewer mains in Carlaw itself. I'll give you an example. The cost of the Carlaw station in the TTC plan was $310 million, and the cost of Gerrard station was $345 million. So that's $655 million worth of extra station construction alone. That makes up that part of that $870 million. There's offsets naturally for the at-grade stations at Queen and Gerrard, and the offsets to those are just over 100 million, around 130 million. So you can see quite quickly that you add up to that $870+ million very quickly. And the fact is that the current alignment that performed well in the IBC remains the Ontario line deliverable that we're going forward with. And through very good work on the part of the design teams and Richard and Carrie and everyone behind them, we've been able to mitigate almost all of the issues that have been raised by the community, and in support of the alignment that we're showing to you today. Back to you, Joseph.
Okay, thank you for that. I wonder if you mentioned Gerard. There's a question here about the Gerard GO station, and I know this is the Ontario line, but the questioner is saying that as part of the GO RER expansion planning, it was announced that Carlaw and Gerard would have both a GO station and an Ontario line subway station, but now it seems that only an Ontario line station. Is that the case? And can you just comment on what happened to the GO station?
Okay, yeah, I can actually comment on that. That is kind of an offshoot of the Relief Line South work. So, we did on the Relief Line South have a station at Gerard. It was obvious that the ridership that was being generated there that didn't necessarily support two stations, and we were working together. We at the time was TTC and Metrolinx and the city to not pursue what was a smart track station at that location for anymore, and that theme has continued. So the subway station is going to get built here, and it's a higher order transit with frequent opt-in service up to 90 seconds during the peak AM and PM periods. So that's the history of that station. Back to you, Joseph.
Okay, thank you. Now, we started a bit late, but and there have been a lot of the answers to the written questions were provided in the actual presentation. And I understand from Georgina Collymore that she has a number of people who are lined up wanting to ask questions in the Zoom room. So we're going to mix it up a bit and go over to the Zoom room now to give more people who are at the microphone a chance to ask their questions. So Georgina, if you're there and able to take over, please.
Thank you, Joseph. So our first question tonight is from MPP Tabbins. Thank you for joining us, and I'm just going to ask that you unmute yourself so that you can ask your question live. Oh.
All right.
There you are. Thank you. Okay. You can go ahead and ask your question live.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity. Two questions. One, at the North Line session, I'd asked about what Metrolinx will do to release homes from the requirement to have construction zone on their title. And I don't know if people in the South End are aware of that answer from you, so I'd like you to readdress that issue so that people don't have a statement on title for the 10 years of construction. And secondly, in the question or in the matter of reducing noise, your slide 11 says you'll be reducing existing noise levels at most locations. Which locations won't see a reduction? And will there be locations that will see an increase in sound? Thank you.
Thank you, MPP Tabbins. Always nice to hear from you. Yes, as you asked this question in the North Alignment, and it's quite appropriate that we talk about it at all of our virtual open houses. So you brought up a very good point, and what we would like to do is we are approaching the title issues, and we're evaluating the actual impacts of our construction. And as we get a little bit closer to having our proponent on board and being able to refine those property takes, we are very actively considering what we can do to release some of those properties. So that is a commitment that we've made to you and the community, that we would continue that engagement and continue that evaluation to as effectively as we can minimize the impact to the neighborhood of these title building transit actor faster materials, as well as getting them off as quickly as we can. And the second half, Carrie, would you like to tackle that one?
Absolutely. Thanks, Malcolm. And thanks for the question, MPP Tabbins. It's a very good one. So I did mention, rightly so, the noise mitigation is effective to reduce levels of noise below existing levels at majority of the locations along the corridor. And as you saw, we assessed a lot of receptors along the joint corridor. We did see that at 5 locations along the joint corridor, and these are at the higher levels of high-rise buildings, where we see some minor residual impacts. These aren't significant impacts, so not just barely noticeable, but we do still have some residual impacts there, and that's simply because noise walls, don't extend up to higher levels of high-rise buildings. Having said that, what we are doing now, that's our commitment to implement noise walls, and now we are looking at other ways and other tools that we might have to explore further mitigation at these locations. So the locations you asked specifically, so these are all clearly outlined in the noise and vibration report, which is available online, but the specific locations are 3 high rises at Carla and Dundas, one at Logan, and one at Pate. So all the information supporting that is available in the noise and vibration assessment report. Please do look at that. There's a lot of good science in there. As I mentioned, we are now looking at other ways that we might reduce noise to higher levels of high-rise buildings. This is, not uncommon when looking at noise walls and other mitigations. So stay tuned for more updates on that, but hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Carrie, for that. Our next question from the Zoom room is from Patricia. So Patricia, I'm going to ask that you unmute yourself as well so you can ask your question live.
Hi, it was so long ago I almost forgot. My question was, when I look at the plans, you suggest the timeline for removal of vegetation is to be determined. There's nothing there to suggest that would be at all dependent on the environmental assessment or the final environmental assessment. So is the plan to wait until you get that final environmental assessment, or is the plan to make these decisions independently of anything that says?
So perhaps I can take this one, and thanks for the question, Patricia. The environmental assessment for this area is the early works report that we've just spoken about tonight. So that report looks at tree removal. We do know that some of the removals slated for the GO expansion were already approved under the Lakeshore East EA. So that work is already approved, and that will likely go ahead first. We do know that we need to remove additional trees ahead of 2022, so ahead of summer 2022, and we have a bird breeding window to compete with there. So we will likely be going ahead with that early in 2022 once the early works report is approved. And again, this is the environmental assessment for the construction activities for the joint corridor area. So as I mentioned, the exact timeline and the exact schedule when those removals will take place is still being finalized. There's quite a lot of logistics, and when it comes to the winter season, there's other things to consider. So we're working through that now, and we hope to be back with a more detailed schedule shortly. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Carrie. Our next question is from Shelley Klein. Shelley is the chair of our Lakeshore CAC. She's one of many community partners who are here tonight. And she does have a few questions. So Shelley, if you can unmute yourself, we can have you begin with some of your concerns, and hopefully we can get to a few of them, and then we'll try to get through a few more questions and come back to you if we can.
Yes, okay. Sorry, wouldn't unmute. I'm here. Hi, everybody. Hi, Metrolinx. And we'll be meeting with you soon on the early works report. And I just wanted to say a quick comment, and then I do have a question. So I think people who are gathered here tonight in the community, I think you need to understand the importance of the early works report, which has just been released about 4 o'clock this afternoon. Nobody's seen it. I'd like to think that that wasn't done on purpose, and we've pushed back, and Metrolinx is now going to add another town hall on October the 5th so that everyone can have a chance to look at it and speak to it. And why this is really, really important is because when they passed Bill 171, Building Transit Faster Act, they permitted the environmental assessment process to be shortcutted in order to bring forth these early works reports. And that means that they can begin construction as soon as these reports are finalized. And that means we literally have, for the legislation, 30 days. So from today, we have 30 days to actually give them comments, to give them feedback, and to raise our issues and concerns. And so I want to encourage the community to have a look at these reports, and hopefully they will post the link here so people can look at the reports. If you don't understand them, there are great summaries in the report that put the information together for you. And then on October 5th, we're encouraging you to participate and to share your issues, which they are then supposed to, according to the regulation and the legislation, resolve. So they are supposed to implement an issues resolution process. So that's the only thing I want to say tonight. It's extremely important that you participate, because this is the last time that the community will have a say in the construction, and according to the legislation. So it is vitally important that we participate in this process. My question tonight is, firstly, it's cart before the horse, because we haven't seen this early works report. We haven't seen an elevation. We don't know what the corridor looks like at all. And now you're asking us to participate and pick noise walls, to pick vegetation. What does the concrete look like? I mean, I really think it's too soon for this discussion. Our community wants to talk about alignment. I thought it was kind of funny you gave us all this contact information, Malcolm, and we can contact you, but you don't want to talk about the alignment. You sent a letter to the city saying, we're not going to listen to you and we don't want to talk about it. So this is what the community wants to talk about. So if we are going to pick noise walls, if you are going to gather feedback on them, I think primarily we need to understand where they are, how high they are, not just the noise wall, but there is sitting on top of a retaining wall. So is the total height, which will determine in people's minds what kind of massive wall they want to look at out their front windows, is it 20 feet? Is it 30 feet? And then the second big question on the noise walls, regardless of what vegetation you put in front of them, is how do they absorb sound? What is the best material? And I think everybody here wants the most sound absorption we can get. I mean, we're facing 1,500 trains a day. So if that's what it's going to be, let's present the sound absorbing qualities. I'm hoping they're in the early works report. And then we can bring that back to the community. I really don't think that anyone wants clear noise walls. They may be all right in certain locations where there's no residential areas, but that's my take on it. So my question tonight is, what is the total height of the noise walls, and when are we going to actually see some kind of elevation or depiction of that animation of the corridor? Thank you.
Hi, Shelley. So I can take a little bit of that, and always nice talking to you. Number one, we totally agree and encourage the community to review the early works report. Absolutely, and we want your input. Your comment about you don't think that a clear noise wall is appropriate for a residential neighborhood. That's exactly the sort of feedback we want to hear. We want to hear the opinions of the community. We believe that it's important to have light transmit through them. So, that's why our bias was kind of going that direction. But if the community has a different opinion and would prefer some sort of opaque colored glass or something done like that, that's what this outreach is all about. One thing I did want to correct is the fact that the new EA process that we're in is not a shortcut or a lesser EA in any way. It actually has some additional requirements for consultation that the other EA, the original EA, didn't have under the transit project assessment, environmental assessment process. So it's not a shortcut by any means. It's still as stringent. It still has requirements. So I just wanted to make sure that the community understood that. And with respect to heights, we are looking at the noise walls between 5 and 7 meters. Kerry can talk about what the modeling was done, but ultimately, what we build there is dependent on our desire to create better noise walls. So we encourage you to go to the sound demo to get a live representation of what that might look like. And Kerry, would you like to fill out any more on the EA side of it?
Sure, thanks, Malcolm. I think you covered a lot of it, but that, again, just to reiterate, the EA process, the EA process is quite robust. We actually, under this regulation, we focus and we zoom in on this particular part of the corridor, and we focus specifically on the construction work. So there's a lot of detail there, a lot of information. Appreciate and I also encourage everybody to check out the report and provide feedback. So thanks, Shelley, for that. In terms of noise wall heights, Malcolm, you're correct. The minimum height is 5 meters high, and we'll go up to 7 meters high as well. We did model reflective, transparent noise walls, and we have confirmed that those are effective at reducing noise to the levels that I mentioned. So it is an effective solution. It does reduce not only train pass-by noise, but overall average noise, both during the day and the night. It will provide added benefits beyond what you have there today. So I do think it is something that it's worth checking out, the noise sound demonstration that I went over earlier. Shelley, I think in there actually, there are some 3D renderings where you can actually see what the noise walls will look like on top of retaining walls, how minimally impactful some of the transparent walls are. But again, as Malcolm said, that's the kind of feedback we're looking for. Our thoughts are that transparent is a good solution here. It maintains that light, it maintains that flow in the community. But if there's other solutions that you're interested in, please do provide that feedback. There's a survey online to do that. And again, we are coming back. We are coming back for more discussion. So thank you for the question. And yes, looking forward to more conversation.
Kerry, I'd just like to add, if there are any questions that people have about the environmental assessment process, please call us. We will walk you through it. We will show you how to be able to comment. So don't ever feel that you don't know what to do. Call us. We've given you our number. We've given you our email address. We will make sure that we can collect your comments to this early works report. So please take advantage of that.
Thank you. Just want to confirm, Kerry, that the total height or the minimum was 5 meters to 7 meters, correct?
That's right, Tina.
Okay,
and
great.
That's really to align.
So our next question. Go right ahead.
Oh, sorry, we cut each other off a little bit. That's really in alignment with our approach for the GO expansion program as well, that will be implementing noise walls as well at a minimum of 5 meter high. So a consistent approach across the Metrolinx network.
Great, thank you. So our next question is from Julie. Julie, I'll ask that you unmute yourself so that you can ask your question live.
Hi, my name is Julie Boudreau and I live on Lewis Street. There hasn't been a lot of discussion during these presentations about the impact of the sort of lower end of this, the project, just heading over the train bridge over Eastern. A lot of emphasis on other parts of the project, and I'd like to know a lot more, if possible, about what is happening to the storage facility that basically creates part of my backyard. It was in yellow the last time, and now it appears to be in pink. Word on the street is that the building has been purchased or expropriated, and I need to know what's going to be happening in my backyard. Thank you.
So I can touch on that, Julie. Yeah, we do have plans for the storage facility and in order to make way for the Ontario line. On the south end, the sound wall treatments are similar to the north end that we were talking about earlier, and Kerry has done the modeling to demonstrate the workings of those noise walls and the significance of them in reducing sound. So you just because you're south of Queen doesn't mean that you get any lesser treatment as far as the built infrastructure is concerned. And then what ends up happening on the storage site is yet to be determined. We have to see how much of that land is going to be utilized by the Ontario line, and then what's left we will be evaluating and reporting back to you and the community. Back to you, Georgina.
Thank you, Malcolm. Next up, we have Leslie. Leslie, I'll ask that you unmute yourself so that you can ask your question live.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. We all know that graffiti is a problem in the city of Toronto. And from being in my downtown neighborhood, I know that our local businesses and residents are required to promptly remove any graffiti that appears on their property. Can you please confirm that Metrolinx will be required to promptly remove any and all graffiti that will appear on these noise walls you're planning? Thanks so much.
So Leslie, I can start that, and then John Potter will chime in. But I do know that the materials that we're selecting for the noise walls and the retaining walls are such that they're somewhat anti-graffiti. If graffiti does occur, we will have language for removal in accordance with the Metrolinx policy. But the other thing is that we're also working very actively with the city on an arts type program that is less prone to that sort of tagging that could occur. So there's a number of tools in our toolkit in order to help with that and reduce that. And you know what we find is that if we create a beautiful structure in a beautiful neighborhood, that people are actually proud of it, and it's less prone to tagging. But there is a part of our society that is involved in that. John, do you have something else to add?
Yeah. So thanks, Malcolm, and I think you covered a lot of the points. And we've been working with the City of Toronto for years on graffiti management strategies, and in fact, we are codifying that in such a way that we'll be able to share with you some of those strategies. That material should be available in the coming, if not weeks, certainly in the next month or two. But graffiti management is a very serious topic for us, and we've been doing a lot of testing on different surfaces around the network, seeing what's the best strategy to remove it. Malcolm talked about things like anti-graffiti coatings, which are kind of a silicone or Teflon coating to the walls, which basically make it hard for graffiti to stick. We talked about surface treatments for walls, which are also in themselves sometimes a deterrent. With vegetative screening, we've got a lot of different ideas, and as we sort of get into the detailed design process, you'll see how those come out. But I would recommend contacting, or going into the community office I'd give it a month and see if there's some more detailed information. But yes, our job is to keep as much as we can graffiti off of our infrastructure.
Would you mind a follow-up question?
Sure.
I recently saw pictures that Shelley Klein posted of the noise walls at Bloor and Lansdowne, and they are fully covered with graffiti. Were they similarly treated, or is this a new treatment that you're looking at doing?
Bloor Lansdowne area, if you're talking along the Toronto West Rail Path, and we have a corridor that goes up just west of Lansdowne, those were built in the I think around 2013, 2016. And in fact, we've learned a lot of lessons from that process. We've learned a lot of lessons about where to put transparent panels so they don't get tagged. We've learned a lot of lessons about how to design our noise barriers and retaining walls so that either they become a good surface for murals or public art, or that we can easily remove graffiti. Or what we've done is we put a pigmented coating, and we're selecting a standard color for the network so we can easily come back and catch graffiti or cover graffiti very quickly. So we're going to have a pretty robust suite of tools. And vegetation, believe it or not, is a big part of our graffiti mitigation strategy. One of the reasons we start to look at a lot of the screening, techniques that we're talking about here is they actually also work to deter graffiti. And there's raspberry bushes are nature's barbed wire. If you really want to deter graffiti, you just plant raspberry bushes everywhere. But yes, we have learned a lot of lessons. And if you want more information, as I say, go to the community office. We can even set up a short meeting, and I can go through some stuff with you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. Our next question is from Patrick. Patrick, I'll ask that you unmute yourself, please.
Hi there. Thanks for taking my question. I live on Salter Street on the east side, and so behind me there's the train, and in front of me there's a street. And so I guess I live on one of the 4 access points. So the first question is really, what am I looking at in terms of construction vehicles going up and down the street? Like what kind, for how long, what times? And then the second question is, so behind me there's a kind of a 2.5-story berm before we even get to the train. So can you tell me the max height for the combined retaining wall and sound barrier? Period. Thank you.
I think my apologies, but my camera's died halfway through the show here. But it's Richard Tucker here, project director. And no, Salter Street is not one of our access points. It's from Eastern Avenue in the area of that access storage building. And so that will be going up on there. I think in terms of the actual heights, I couldn't give exact heights right at the moment because that section is still under detailed design. So I think we do have an idea of noise walls that Carrie's talked about, but in terms of the exact embankment height, that's still part of designing the profile of the rails through that area. So I couldn't give an exact height yet. Carrie, Malcolm, anything to add?
Yeah, so what I would suggest, Patrick, is that you share your coordinates with us, your email, so that when we do get things closer to finalized, we can reach out to you and have that dialogue and pass it back to Carrie.
Thanks, Malcolm. And hi, Patrick. So if we're thinking about the location correctly, I think we're looking at a 5-meter high noise wall in your area. But again, as Malcolm said, please do reach out, give us the exact coordinates, and we can absolutely confirm that.
Thank you, Carrie. Our next question is from Alex. Alex had to drop off the line, but he did ask that I ask his question for him. So, does the construction of the Ontario line in the east overlap with the Lakeshore, Gardner, Portland's revamp? If so, have you accounted for local traffic disruptions because of that project?
So I can partially answer that, and Richard can fill in some. But yeah, we are actually very well coordinated with the city and the work that's going to be occurring down at that area. Our traffic modeling is still underway in regards to managing some of the lane reductions that could be occurring as a result of the work at the bridges in particular. So that is all happening. Richard, do you have anything else to add about?
Yeah, no, Malcolm. I mean, yeah, the basically our traffic modeling when we look at exactly how we're doing the construction, and any lane closures that may be required from time to time. Our traffic modeling takes into account all those works that are known with the City of Toronto and are on the schedule for this area, as well as beyond this area, because obviously that has an influence on traffic as well. So we do look on a fairly wide basis as to how the traffic gets modeled, and that's part of what we do prior to going to the city to request any lane closures.
And I can add just one little piece. There is a group called the Lower Don Working Group, of which Metrolinx, the City of Toronto, and the TRCA and Waterfront Toronto are all part of. And at that forum, beyond the coordination with the City of Toronto that we're talking about, all 4 public agencies coordinate their activities in this area, which we call the Lower Don, which includes Eastern Avenue and Lakeshore, the Portlands, and the areas both a bit north and south of the Union Station Rail Corridor East.
Thank you, John. Our next question is from Mary. Mary, I will ask that you unmute yourself as well so that you can ask your question live. Are you there, Mary?
Oh, okay, good. It's working. Yes. Mary Fregadakis here. Thanks so much for taking my questions. I actually have 2 of them. The first is about the extra park space, and the second is about property requirements. So you're talking about the parks being a bit wider with a high retaining wall for the track bed plus the high fencing for noise. So from a headline perspective, that's great news, more green space. The bad news is that it has the backdrop of concrete and fencing. You talk about softening the appearance by maximizing vegetative screening and tree planting, but we live in a cold climate, and there probably are 7 to 8 months where there isn't going to be much greenery. So how are you going to soften the appearance from the parks? That's the first question.
I can take that. So we talk about the space that's, I'm going to answer this in 2 parts. First, just addressing how we will likely use the additional lands that are available to the park. So what's going to be very important is we're talking about vegetative screening. We're talking about landscaped embankments, terraced embankments, but it's also important we don't reduce the, amount of usable amenity space in the parks adjacent to the rail corridor. So, that extra land gives us space to create sort of vegetative screening in 3 dimensions that can help, reduce especially the impact of the retaining wall, and also allows the parks to function as they are today. And if you go into the questionnaire, you'll see a question about integrated seating, which will enhance amenity for the park by giving places for people to sit and look back at the playing fields. But what you will have with this space allows us to either build terraces or vegetated embankments, which means less visible concrete. And you talk about vegetation, that you're right. We live in Toronto. We have, certainly a long enough winter. But that's another question we're coming to you, like what kinds of plantings? And this is the kind of feedback we're looking for. We are looking honestly at 4-season plantings. We want to make sure that whatever landscape design we put forward, and with it, especially with relation to vegetative screening and that kind of new restored vegetated backdrop to the parks, we want it to look good at all seasons. So, and it's not just the winter, summer. We're looking at plantings that provide different colors throughout the season. So yeah, look at that. It's at least it's the concepts are introduced in the questionnaire. And as we move forward, I think we're doing this for another project where we're setting up what's called community conversations to talk about plantings, pollinator gardens, and other ideas that, we're bringing to our project, but actually have some benefit for the community. Like if you look at pollinator gardens or pollinator landscapes, they work best if not contiguous, there's large numbers of them. So, we're hoping to bring some, knowledge to local gardeners so that we can support, in the community, the objectives we're trying to introduce in adjacent to our rail corridors.
So
John, and Mary, I just wanted to add to that. We also have a very robust dialogue happening with Toronto Parks and Forestry about the parks and about some of the investments that we can make in those parks. So we are going to be reaching out to the community. We've started that process to find out, what can we do with that extra space in Jimmy Simpson? What can we rejuvenate some things that are maybe a little wore down and wore out? So that's all part of a dialogue that's going to be happening with both the community.
So are you considering adding extra money to public realm?
Yeah, so we're actually looking at if there was a splash pad that was slightly deteriorated and needed refurbishment. We're looking at investing in the community. There's opportunities for us to do that throughout many parts of the Ontario line. Mary, back to your second question.
My next question is about property requirements. So you mentioned, and I think it was you, Malcolm, that said earlier that you're still determining the property requirements and they're going to be finalized as the project planning progresses. I mean, surely there's a preliminary list, and is there some reason why you cannot provide us with a list of those properties instead of like having 100 or hundreds of people's homes have, that they're in a rail corridor on the title of their property throughout the construction project?
So Mary, dialogue has started with some of the affected property owners. We did share a role plan that you can very quickly see which properties are impacted. But through this area, through what we call the joint corridor, where GO Transit and the Ontario line will run together, we have started the property procurement process. And we will be contacting all the affected property owners. Just because you have a notice on title by the Building Transit Faster Act, that doesn't mean that there's a property, and we've been very clear with that. What that means is that we have rights and privileges on title in the event that we should need to do something as far away as 30 or 40, 50 meters from the alignment. They're primarily meant to deal with traffic congestion issues and things like that. But as we indicated earlier tonight, we are looking at refining that list as we primarily when we get our Progeco on board, who will help us define the impacted properties, and we'll certainly be working hard to reduce the effect on title. Does that answer your question, Mary?
Not entirely, but I don't want to monopolize the whole meeting with my questions, so we can talk. We can continue to talk offline.
Thank you, Mary. I appreciate your question and
Yeah, and
allowing us to
Mary,
take a few
happy to
more
talk to you. Happy to talk to you anytime, Mary.
Thank you, Malcolm. Our next question is from Saffron. Saffron, if you can unmute yourself, you can go ahead and ask your question live.
Hi there. I was just wondering what the actual size of the trains are.
So they're up to 100-meter long trains. They're on standard gauge rails. Our rail stock systems operations and maintenance proponents are going to be ultimately determining whether they run 3-car, 4-car, 5-car trains, depending on the vehicles that they're going to be buying. So we have 3 proponents that are vying for this piece of work. So we'll be able to definitively answer that, but we have absolutely calculated the ultimate capacity of the Ontario line predicated on 100-meter trains. Back to you, Georgina.
Thank you, Malcolm. Our next question is from Lena. Lena, I'll ask you to unmute yourself and you can go ahead and ask your question. Hi, Lena, are you still with us? Okay, so perhaps we'll skip Lena and we will go to Hannah. Hannah, if you're ready, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and you can ask your question live. Well, it seems like we're losing a few people. We'll go to the next person in line to ask a question, and that person was Kimberly. So Kimberly, if you are on the line still, please unmute yourself and you can go ahead and ask your question live.
Hi there, sorry, it's been a while. So when you talk about the noise and it decreasing by 50%, that's per train, correct? Or have you actually studied what the cumulative effect is? Because when you multiply the amount of trains that's going to be now running through the corridor, even if it's at 50%, but all the time, it's a completely different situation.
Right. Hi, Kimberly. Thanks for that question. So we've done both. So we've looked at the reduction that we're talking about is an average. So it looks at the sound level over a period of daytime. It's divided into daytime and nighttime, and it looks at the average. So it takes all of the pass-bys, which are all significantly quieter in the majority of locations, as we've already talked about, and then it averages those noise levels over a period of daytime or nighttime. And in both instances, we are seeing reductions in noise. And I will say, 10 decibel, I think that was an average noise level, and I think that that's at a few locations. That's not everywhere. The reductions do vary. But they for the most of the corridor, they are reductions. So yes, absolutely, there will be more volume of trains, but each train that goes by will be quieter because we have noise walls there where we don't have noise walls right now. And then on average, that results in an average lower overall noise.
Thank you. I believe we have our next question from Jeff. And let's see. Jeff, I'll ask that you unmute yourself if you're still here. There we go. Hi, Jeff.
Hi there. Thanks very much for taking my question. Just wanted to know if anybody, either on the panel, but more importantly, in the planning of all of this at Metrolinx, is a current resident of Leslieville or Riverdale, and what their thoughts on the impact's going to be on this.
Sorry, Jeff. Are you asking if any of our Metrolinx staff live in the neighborhood? Georgina, is Jeff still there?
Oh, I'm not sure. I think we might have lost him because I don't see him in the list anymore.
So what I can say is that Metrolinx employees are all across the GTA, and we have representation all across. So I would imagine
I'm more referring to the people who are actually planning this. Employees can be everywhere. I totally understand that, but I meant just from the planning aspect of this.
So from a planning point of view, there's a number of things that go into the planning. One is the business cases. That's part of our planning process, where we evaluate different solutions to the transit problem we're trying to solve. Our planners they work on projects all across the GTHA, and their ability to understand the uniqueness of all different scenarios is really quite good. So I would say that yes, of course, we're sensitive and understanding of the projects that we're promoting, and that we take that into account in our decision-making process. Back to you, Georgina.
Malcolm. We're going to go back to Kimberly. Unfortunately, she got cut off on the last question that she asked, so I'm going to unmute her again, and she will ask her question live. My apologies, Kimberly. Please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay, just to follow up to my question. So I live on Degrassi Street and I can hear and see the trains all the time. So there is a much bigger difference when 4 trains go by like consecutively versus 1 train going by at a time. So these trains, when they're going to be, if it's rush hour and you're going to have all these tracks and all these trains going at the same time, that's going to be completely different.
So I'll give some advice to start, and then obviously I'll pass it to Carrie. But the noise walls that we're planning to build are intended to significantly improve the noise profile, specifically along Degrassi. And I believe that our noise lab, sound lab, has a site at Bruce Mackey that we would encourage you to go visit and give us some feedback on.
I don't mean to monopolize, but your sound lab, again, is it 1 train or is it multiple trains? Like, this is what you're not thinking about, or you won't answer.
No, absolutely, we will answer, Kimberly, and I apologize if it's not clear. We look at the way we look at it in our assessment is we model all of the cumulative impacts of each train pass by. So we know so the noise walls will be effective at reducing the noise from every train passing by, be it an Ontario Line train, a GO train, a VIA train. Overall, that averages out to an overall average lower sound level. So the noise simulation just takes a look at 1 pass by, so you can just see what it will feel like to have one GO train or 1 Ontario Line train pass by. But in actuality, all of the trains passing by are going to be quieter. In many cases, about half as loud for each pass by, and on average, in some cases, about half as loud. As I said, the reductions will vary, but we are seeing improvements in the majority of the locations along the corridor, including where you live.
And Carrie, we also take into account the frequency of trains in that modeling.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Malcolm. So we are actually looking at, when we did our assessments, as I mentioned, we're looking at the combined impacts of both the future Ontario Line full service and the GO Lakeshore East full service. So we're looking and we're projecting out to a maximum service scenario, in some cases, decades into the future. So, on opening day of the Ontario Line, we don't anticipate to have nearly as many trains as we modeled from. But the approach we take to environmental assessments is always looking at a maximum case scenario, of a maximum worst case scenario, so that we can mitigate to the to the full extent possible. So we do very much anticipate improvements in this area.
Yeah, and the last thing, Kimberly, is we do have our October 5th virtual open house. After you've reviewed the materials, if you have more questions, please come back. Or if you're concerned, give us a call. We'll happy to talk to you.
Yeah, we keep on coming back with the same questions, and it's not very good answers, but I'll let someone else speak.
So Kimberly, encourage you to take a look at the assessment report, and then absolutely happy to talk to you in more detail about it.
Great. Thank you, Carrie and Malcolm. Next up, we have Adam. Adam, I'll ask that you unmute yourself and ask your question live.
Hello?
Hi.
Hi, okay. I have a question about, is there going to be any point, preferably before October 5th, that we're going to see a number that is street level to top of whatever you're building? Everyone knows that's what we want to know. You keep talking about this retaining wall and that noise barrier, and you know what you're doing is disingenuous. You're trying to give us small numbers. If this was your own neighborhood, you'd want to know, if I'm standing on the sidewalk, what am I looking at? How tall is it? How can you expect us to give you feedback on what that should look like if we can't even visualize it? Because you're giving us some numbers, not the other numbers. It doesn't make sense. And to be quite frank, a lot of us are a little upset to begin with about, you're asking us, oh, we want your opinion, but we feel like every opinion we've given you to date has fallen on deaf ears. So how is pushing what you want back on us supposed to make us feel better about this whole process?
So I can take the first part of this. So we came out last time we met, and we were talking about the bridges and the fact that we're raising the bridges in order to create a more appropriate clearance through the corridor. That entailed a raising of the corridor from its existing height by anywhere from 0.65 to a meter, depending on where we are across the alignment. So that would be the embankment increase that we communicated last time we were out. And we've also told you that on top of that retaining wall, we're going to be building anywhere from 5 to 7 meter noise barrier. And right now we're just finalizing that. Our thoughts were that it was going to be a clear noise barrier, but clearly there's a desire for some other ideas to be floated about, and that's why we're reaching out now. So we encourage you to participate with us to try and make the outcome of what we build through this neighborhood better. Back to you, Georgina.
Thanks, Malcolm. Our next question is from Dave. Dave, I'll ask you to unmute yourself to go ahead and ask your question. Hi, Dave.
Hi. My question is regarding the construction period and what percentage of it will take place overnight. I live close to a couple of the bridges around Dundas. There's actually 2 bridges there, the Logan Bridge and the Dundas Bridge. And I'm concerned that the 1.5 years of bridges is going to be a 1.5 years of no sleep with beeping trucks and everything else. A second related question is, will the sound barrier continue over the bridges, or are there going to be gaps right near Ray McCleary Towers and other streets nearby? So 2 questions. Thank you.
I can take on the start in terms of the construction. I mean, their construction Metrolinx is subject to very strict standards in terms of noise and vibration while we're carrying on operations. To the greatest extent possible, we try to conduct our work during the day, or 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. type time period. There will be occasions when we need to slew tracks, or we have to hoist a bridge beam into place, that we have to do overnight. But the idea is to keep those to a minimum as much as possible. And there are, in terms of the, I'll let Carrie talk about, the noise standards that are applied to our construction activities, but they do take into account daytime versus nighttime hours. And so they are stricter at night. Maybe Carrie, you could take it over from there. I think Carrie's working with the mute button for a second there.
Yeah, if only I could unmute myself, then I could answer. So I think the question was around nighttime noise, and absolutely yes, we will be requiring our contractors to adhere to more stringent criteria for noise and vibration in the night, and if in the event that night work is required. And I think as we mentioned, we will be doing ongoing noise and vibration monitoring. We will be letting the communities know if there is any particularly noisy events that are coming up, so that we can work with you to kind of address any concerns you might have, or any solutions that we might be able to provide. So on that note, I hope that is sufficient. But I know, Dave, you had another question about noise walls along bridges, and what I can say there is that we are looking at that right now, and we're looking at the technical feasibility of it, and we will be able to confirm that at a slightly later date. However, we can confirm that whichever option we do land on, we will be able to confirm noise level reductions that we've just talked about today. So do stay tuned for that. We're still working out technical feasibility on that, but we're confident that we can achieve the noise reductions that we've talked about this evening, and that are outlined in great detail in our noise and vibration report.
Yeah, and I guess, Carrie, the one other thing I forgot to mention was that when we're in construction, there are complaint lines and lines you can make, so that if you do notice noise or there's something happening that's not acceptable, then there is a way to get in touch with us immediately to address anything that's going on. So we do provide that outreach. We do engage with the community if we're anticipating doing something noisy that's completely unavoidable. But as I said, that'll be the rare exception, not the rule. And there are ways to reach out to us 24 hours a day in case there are any concerns about noise, vibration, dust, safety concerns, anything like that. Back to you, Georgina.
Great. Thank you, Malcolm. Our next question is from Teresa. So Teresa, I'll ask you to unmute and you can go ahead and ask your question live.
Hi, I was just actually wondering, because you guys keep talking about noise reduction, but I want to know, I can't find it. Maybe I'm just looking in the wrong spots, but I want to know the actual decibel measurements that you're doing, not words. Like, can you actually have a document, or is there a document that I could see where you actually have done somebody else mentioned about 1 train versus 4 trains going by. Have you done a measurement with 1 train, 2 trains, 3 trains, 4 trains? How is it? What is the decimal? And when you have the noise wall up, how much does this actually reduce it?
Yeah, I can take that one. Thanks, Teresa. Great question. And that's exactly what our noise and vibration assessment report outlines. So it looks specifically at the full service scenario. As I mentioned, projects well into the future and identifies as many the full maximum trains that we project to be on this corridor in, I think the number is 2060. Don't quote me on that, but it's something like that. So if you go and take a look, it's appended, I believe it's Appendix C of our early works report. It outlines in all that detail you're looking for the decibel reductions at each sensitive receptor location, not just the overall average, but also the pass-bys. And it shows all of that information. The reason why we don't go into that detail at the meeting tonight is because it varies by location. So I wouldn't want to give out one number because it's a long corridor. So please check that out. Have a look at where it might be most applicable to you. And again, happy to talk more about it.
Have they done measurements with the current trains with the current wall, and then done it somewhere else like Lansdowne and Bloor, and they can see what the difference is? I know it's a different area,
Yeah,
but you could at least
not
guesstimate.
No, because we wouldn't look at a different area because a lot of the effectiveness of a wall takes into consideration vertical alignments and lines of sight to sensitive receptors. So you really have to model and do the assessment. Our noise engineers actually build out a 3D model of the corridor to really accurately assess this. So we do take current levels, and then we look at future levels, and then we look at the difference of what a noise wall could bring. So please do have a look at the report, because I think it probably outlines it a little bit better than I'm doing right now. And let us know what you think. Please provide feedback on this. Anything that's unclear, we'll be happy to explain further. Thanks.
I think we're back to Joseph.
Carrie. Oh, we have one more question, if that's okay.
Yep.
Perfect. We were going to go back to Shelley, but she's asked that we include someone else to have the final question. So we're going to go to Tony Whitaker. Tony, if you'd like to ask a final question, I will ask you to unmute yourself and you can go ahead and ask live.
Are we okay?
Yeah. Hi, Tony.
Yep.
Please go ahead.
Hi there. It's been a long wait. Just 3 very quick clarifications for the October 5th meeting. Number 1, Carrie, noise and sound and the number of trains. We're going from 170 trains today to 1,500 sometime in the 2030s, just on the sound and noise with having trains going, that number of trains per day going by my backyard. The noise and vibration numbers needs to be clarified. Number 2, the number of bridges. Bridges have changed. Before we were going to replace Eastern, Queen, Dundas and Logan and leave Carlo and Gerard. Now we're hearing nothing about Easton's bridge tonight. We're hearing a new bridge at Queen, a new bridge at Dundas, plus an additional bridge now for the Ontario line, a new bridge at Logan, plus an additional bridge for the Ontario line. Nothing on Gerard and Carlo, which Malcolm has told me before. They're going to be building another bridge between the existing one and where the Real Jerk restaurant is, adjacent to the existing bridge for the Ontario line. So I need clarification on that for October the 5th. Number 3, the transparent, this is for John, the transparent noise walls. It's not going to work where we live. We have had a berm built by the builder. We've had a wood fence built, so we don't see the GO trains. We do not want to see the trains running by. I think it's a great idea for the parks where you get the sunlight and the trees and everything else, but not where there's residences. And we will be very much opposed to that on First Avenue and Logan. We do not want to see transparent walls for the noise walls. And also the noise walls being 5 meters, they're on top of a retaining wall. So some people have asked earlier on tonight, what is the actual total height? So when you come back to us on the 5th of October, we'd like to know what the total height's going to be. If it's minimum of 5, is it going to be 7 or 8? 5 meters is 16 or 17 feet for all us old guys. Try and visualize, as somebody asked before, what's the visualization of that? We need to see that. And my final question is to Malcolm. Malcolm and I have had several discussions about the underground option, and it won't leave us. And he's come up with it. He's told us tonight it's $800 million. He's told me that there are numbers being worked on but I'd like to see them. I'd like to see them and compare them to the original budgets for the Ontario line corridor, because now you're replacing bridges, which you weren't doing before. Now there's no longer a tunnel under the Don River like on the relief line, so there's a savings there. The subway station at Carlo and Queen, and also at Carlo and Gerard. There is a private developer there who's involved with Infrastructure Ontario and Metrolinx building in the west end of town. First Choice, which is Loblaws. They own the Riverdale Plaza. They can build the underground station there, and they can have rights to build above it. The same at Queen and Carlo. They own a Shoppers Drug Mart on the corner, on the northwest corner. There's land there where they can build, and also to help pay this $655 million number that Malcolm brought to us tonight. So I'm saying these numbers of $800 million can be mitigated and should be looked at when you're doing an analysis, because you have the history now, the precedent of selling off some of these transit-oriented community sites to private developers to pay for the stations, and in return, they're getting some residential density there. And all we're doing is asking for the same thing. And having the underground going along Eastern and up Carlaw is going to take away all of these issues with parks and trees, and six tracks going through diagonally right through our neighborhood for 2 kilometers. I think that's it for tonight. Thank you.
Can I just start? Thank you for your comments, and I just want to address 2
Sure.
subsections. One is about the noise walls transparent, and you said it makes perfect sense for the park, not so much sense for your backyards. That's why we encourage you to take the participate in the questionnaire, because that's the kind of feedback that is useful to us as we start to kind of move into detailed design. The second one, keep in mind, because the issue about the aggregate height of the noise walls and the retaining walls, there's a couple of things to keep in mind. One is, of course, the grade changes. So there's not going to ever be a single height. The other one, just to kind of help you visualize, Malcolm talked about, look, if you want to know the height of the noise wall, look at the corridor today and add between 0.6 meters and 1 meter. That gives you just a kind of a on the ground kind of ability to kind of assess it. But then the most important thing is, keep in mind that when we talk about the height of the retaining walls, so much of what we're doing is to mitigate the perceived height. Yes, the corridor will be the datum. The datum's being set in part to make sure that there is adequate clearance at the roadways. There's municipal standards. We need to make sure that our bridges, leave enough space above the roadways. But that is why we talk about landscaped embankments, terraced embankments, various other vegetation strategies, because we are working along the corridor, especially in the parks, to reduce that. Yes, the overall height may be one dimension, but the perceived height will be something different. So it's kind of important that you keep that in mind when you're starting to think about the dimensions. I always say this, that statistics are used far too frequently. They're not actually that useful. It's about the experience of the space and the experience of what you're going to be looking at. It's the experiential qualities that really need to be addressed, and that's something we are trying to address. But yes, I'm sure we can get that information about the aggregate heights to you.
The other reason why it's important, John, is because on my property specifically where I live, you're expropriating some of our property, some of our land. So you're going to be coming into our backyards, and this is going to have a big impact on what we see from our windows, myself and my 19 neighbors who are impacted on this. So it's a big issue with us. When we bought these homes 12 years ago, they were brand new, and the builder at that time was required to build a berm and a wood fence above it, 6 feet high, to take away the GO train look. It wasn't so much the noise, but it was certainly the look. So we don't have to see it.
Yeah.
And certainly that would be the case. And as you come closer into the houses, it's going to become even more of an issue. Thanks.
Yeah, and that is all very legitimate. So as I say, that would be really, we've heard you tonight, and it'd be helpful to hear hear more from you on the questionnaire. And another thing too is, feel free to reach out to us. We can always book an appointment, because one thing is we're trying to do is give private landowners some ideas about how, what they can do in their own property to kind of, help screen or reduce the visual impacts of, say, a new retaining wall that's encroaching into your backyard, or a noise wall. So we're glad to provide you some ideas and questions. There are our vegetation guideline will give you a lot of information on the types of plantings you can use, how, that, they're always going to be local, non-invasive species, but plantings that, you can plant close to a rail corridor and be confident that they will grow and mature in such a way they won't cause any issues with our infrastructure. But
right.
yes,
well, John, I'm happy. Yeah, I'm happy to write to you and fill out the forms. I'm happy to do that. Malcolm and I have walked my site 2 or 3 times. He's very familiar with my property, and he can share with you my concerns because he's seen them visually with me. And again, I'm happy to meet any of you on site. Certainly Carrie wants to come out too. I'm happy to meet with you and walk you, and Daryl's been there too. So it's one big happy family that can come out and have a look.
Yeah, and Malcolm can definitely debrief us. But yeah, so sure. we're happy to work with you because we understand we're putting new infrastructure in an established community, and we're very sensitive to that, and we want this project to be a success for the community in the long run.
Okay.
Hey Tony, it's Malcolm. Just a couple of things on the bridges. Yes, there's a new bridge going over Eastern. There's a new bridge going over Queen. There's a new bridge going over Dundas. At Logan, there's going to be a new bridge built beside it to build the Ontario line, the new station there, and then going over Gerard, a new bridge will be built to the side of that one. So those 2 bridges, Logan and Gerard, will not be totally rebuilt. So
well, the early works report tonight, Malcolm, says that there will be a new bridge built at Dundas and a new bridge built at Logan to accommodate the Ontario line to the north of the existing bridges. So that needs clarification for the October 5th meeting, please, because it's not clear. You're telling me we're not talking the same language this evening. If you read the report, it says something different to what you're telling me now.
No problem.
And I haven't had time.
Sorry, for Eastern Avenue?
No, I'm talking about Dundas and Logan.
Okay.
You broke up, Tony.
One of the things I picked up today. So I think that needs clarification for October the 5th. The new bridge is being built in addition to the existing ones at Dundas and Logan. I know there's a new bridge at Queen and Degrassi, and Malcolm's saying there's a new bridge at Easton, but it's not mentioned in the early works report. And I know there's a new bridge being built at Gerard and Carlaw to the west of the existing one to accommodate the Ontario line subway tracks, the 2 tracks. At least that's what I was told by Malcolm when he and I did our walkabout.
Yep. So we will absolutely clarify that with you, Tony, and we'll actually clarify it with you before the October 5th meeting.
Thank you.
On the noise, Carrie, did you just want to touch base on noise for October 5th that Tony was talking about?
For sure, Tony. I think all of that information is actually in the noise and vibration report. It was just released, so please do take some time to review it. We can come with any additional information you're looking for. The volumes you mentioned, I think, are a little bit higher than what the real life situation is. We did model for a full build situation. I don't believe that's 1,500, but closer to 900, I believe. But do check it out.
Carrie, it's 900 Ontario line and 600 GO trains. So that's the number.
Anyway, that is combined. So anyways, but please do look at the report. And if there's any clarifications, we can come back on October 5th and provide those. Happy to do that. Realize that folks do need to take some time to digest. Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
And last thing, Tony, as I spoke to you the other day, we are working up a rendering through this area so that you can visualize what it will look like from the 2 vantage points that we spoke about. We will make some assumptions about noise walls and retaining walls just for the visual, but it'll help inform a good discussion.
And I understand that Ranjit's no longer with you, so we would like to know who our new contact person will be for that issue, the development issue.
Yep, we will make sure that our property team is in touch with you with their new contacts. Thank you very much, Tony. Why don't I throw it back to Joseph?
Okay, well, thank you very much, Malcolm. Thank you, everyone. This is clearly a community that is engaged and cares, and I hope that you feel that the Metrolinx team responded sincerely and as straightforwardly as possible tonight. Of course, this is not the end. As has been said, there is another session scheduled for the 5th of October, and if you are on the page, just on the right-hand side, in the right-hand margin, you'll see a title that says East Segment Sound Demonstration and a yellow button that says Hear for Yourself. That's where you can go to listen to the sound demo. And at the bottom, you'll see East Segment Design Consultation and a yellow button that says Have Your Say. And that is where you'll find the survey that the panel was talking about. Of course, at the top of the page, you can click there to book a meeting or contact the team via email or book a session or reserve a place at the next online meeting. So again, thank you to everybody from Metrolinx and all the members of the community for participating tonight. I hope that you found this a worthwhile evening. Good night and stay home safely.